Okay, good evening again, everyone. This is Nick Petro at the National Weather Service in Raleigh. It's about 7 o'clock Sunday evening on March 11th, and we're doing this webinar here to discuss the potential for some wintry weather across central North Carolina. I thought I'd first start with this loop here, and you can see I've got the current radar. Let me turn off the precipitation identifier, and you can see there's several batches of precipitation of rain, particularly across the eastern and southeastern portion of the country. That's all rain. The numbers you see there are air temperature. The second area of precipitation that's going to be a bigger concern tomorrow is back in here. Certainly that is associated with an upper level disturbance, and that is going to bring a band of heavier precipitation while at the same time cooling the atmosphere. What you see in this area right here is all going to remain rain, so look for some light rain to pass across most of central North Carolina here during the rest of the evening and even into overnight. Watch this area here. If you're up late tonight, watch this area begin to blossom. This area here should fill in across the eastern portions of Tennessee and northern Georgia. That should fill in, and more rain should move up toward our area by sunrise tomorrow. And again, see this little swirl back here over the western sections of Kentucky and Tennessee. That's associated with an upper level low, and that portion of the storm system will roll across during the late morning and afternoon hours tomorrow, again providing perhaps a band of heavier precipitation and some rapid cooling, which then could give us that risk for some precipitation type concerns. So let me go ahead and switch over to my slides. And again, as everybody has probably already noted, there's a winter weather advisory now in effect for basically areas along and north of Interstate 85, and I sent that out at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So changes since that briefing, we're concerned about. And again, certainty is obviously low, or confidence is low, but we're concerned about the risk for some higher amounts, particularly in very localized areas, and I'll touch on that here in a minute. There might be a possibility we may have to do a few tweaks to this advisory, but right now this is the way things are shaping up, where any tweaks won't come until later tonight, after we get another look at the next round of models that will come in a couple hours. So anyway, moving on to the next slide here. Not a whole lot of change in this slide since 4 o'clock. I will point out we made this, instead of 1 inch, we made this 1 to 2 inches for areas mainly north of I-85, and again late morning and afternoon. South of 85 down to about the Highway 64 corridor, we're thinking still of maybe a light coating of snow and sleet, mainly on grassy areas during the afternoon and evening hours. Again, there can't rule out a few isolated spots that could get up to an inch. We think in terms of hazardous travel, we think the biggest concern for any type of travel hazards will be along and north of the Interstate 85 corridor. And at that, the ground is warm. We're going into this event with above freezing conditions. So, basically, it's the potential for hazardous travel will be based on how hard it comes down. It'll all be rate driven. Assuming it comes down light to moderate, that should just hit the ground and stay wet. If it comes down hard, then it'll begin to pile or to accumulate, but then it'll be somewhat of a slushy type situation. And again, mainly worst of those conditions on elevated roadways, bridges, and overpasses. Now, for areas that do receive accumulating snow or accumulating sleet, as always, there could be localized black ice concerns Tuesday morning, with temperatures expected to drop just below freezing Monday night. All right, so that's a summary. Now, this slide just kind of gives you, just at a glance, the parts of central North Carolina we think, have the greatest risk or greatest concerns for hazards. And we're thinking again, and we've mentioned this numerous times, that along and north of Interstate 85 is where we think the worst of the wintry type accumulations would be. And again, that's no surprise. That's perfectly fits in with what we would expect for a March storm for climatological purposes. This is where, it would typically have the worst winter weather. So shouldn't be any surprises there. Limited impacts further south, south of 85 down to the Highway 64 corridor. Although, those areas there are not out of the woods, so to speak. There could be a band somewhere in the eastern, in the Triangle region, maybe over to the northern I-95 corridor, could see a localized burst of sleet or snow during the afternoon or evening hours, which could give you very localized light accumulations. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip past this. I more or less already mentioned the setup and why we're getting the wintry weather that we're expecting. So this is kind of these radar simulations are provided to give you a sense of the timing. And one thing I'll point out here is this dashed line represents the changeover. South of the dashed line, it would be rain. North of the dashed line, it would be some sort of wintry mix. So by seven, let me back up for a minute. So prior to 7 o'clock, we expect it to be all rain across all of central North Carolina. Not until we get to about 7 to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning do we start to see maybe a change over to some sort of wintry mix across the northwest Piedmont of central North Carolina, the far northern reaches of the Triad. And then as the day progresses, as we get into the late morning hours, notice this dashed line here where we think the precip type changeover will be. That will progress a little bit further east and a little bit further south, lining up approximately with Interstate 85. And north of that line, we expect that's where we expect the snow to mix with the rain and maybe some very light snow accumulations. Again, it'll be dependent on the rates. If it comes down light, it's not going to accumulate. It'll melt in contact with the ground. If it comes down hard, then that's where we're going to see, and when we're going to see better accumulating snow. And, we really won't be able to tell that until, we're watching it on the radar, because it's so hard to pinpoint, the exact spots they're going to see those heavier rates. South of that dashed line, again, it's going to be raining. Now, as we head into the early afternoon and that upper level spin in the atmosphere that I was talking about earlier at the beginning of this webinar, as that begins to move east, now we're going to see a greater portion of central North Carolina at that point in time, maybe seeing a mixture of perhaps even some sleet mixing in, but a wintry mix of sleet and snow north of this dashed line here. The heaviest accumulations, again, we think will be up near the Virginia border, along and north of the 85. Again, south of this dashed line, moderate, light to moderate rain. As we get into the late afternoon hours, again, as that upper level, low moves across, again, we could see that rain to snow line push even a little bit further east and just a bit further south, maybe perhaps even encompassing the Triangle region. And in this area here, again, from essentially the Triangle region over toward eastern Triad regions up to the Virginia border, somewhere in here, there could be a brief burst of heavier sleet and snow. And again, I can't tell you the exact spots that are going to see that. Okay, but somewhere in this area, there could be a very localized swath of heavier accumulations. Okay, and so right now, again, we think the best chance for that will be closer to the Virginia border. And then as we get into the evening hours, we should begin to see that all wrap up and pull east. The rain snow line may be as far south as, say, Lillington over to Smithfield, over to Goldsboro, all rain south of that dash line. So places like, Rockingham, Laurinburg, even, Fayetteville and Clinton should pretty much just see, rain all throughout the whole event. And then by late evening tomorrow, it should pretty much be over for everywhere. So anyway, that's our best thought right now, how we think this is going to play out and the timing of it. Okay, so let me go to the next slide here, because this shows the amounts. Now, last year we started this probabilistic snow forecast where we have a low end, a high end, and then the official. So the low end basically means that there are models that still show nothing will accumulate. There are several models that show nothing, even all the way up to North Roxborough. There are more than one model that shows there could be not a single bit of accumulation. On the far right, that's the high end amounts. Those are basically how much snow we could get if the worst of the worst case models verified. So this is on the high end amount. That's like the worst of the worst case scenario. Okay, so in the middle is what we think, based on everything we've poured over and the consensus of the model data, what we think is the best or the most likely scenario to occur. And again, we're thinking an inch or two of snow along and north of Interstate 85 and less than an inch south of there, down to about the Highway 64 corridor. And again, I will point out that those wet and warm ground conditions generally would mitigate accumulation, but the exception is during high snowfall precipitation rates. And when the snow or sleet comes down hard, that cools the surface down to freezing, and that would allow for accumulation. So again, keep in mind, I've said this several times, this is going to be rate driven. If it comes down light, if it even comes down moderate, probably isn't going to amount to much. But if it comes down hard, that's when we're going to see the accumulations occur. All right. And again, the last bullet there, it's possible there could be a few pockets of that heavier snow. I'm not saying all of central North Carolina would see the high end amounts, but pockets within that could occur. But again, our confidence is extremely low where that would occur. All right. Some things to consider, just some random items here. And again, typically we need to have the cold air in place prior to the storm. So that's not the case here. The cold air is coming at the tail end, and anytime cold air comes at the tail end, it's really, really difficult to predict how much. Okay, and with tomorrow's storm, it's mostly going to be falling during the daytime, and again in March, that usually means accumulations are hard to realize with a high sun angle and the warm, the preceding warm conditions. So again, in order for snow to readily accumulate, it has to come down really hard. Otherwise, where rates are light, it'll simply melt and when it hits the warm ground. And again, I pointed this out already, the third bullet. Climatology suggests the best chance for snow to accumulate will be north of the I-85 corridor, closer to the Virginia border. So our counties up near the Virginia border, you're most likely, the odds are the highest there for these accumulations that I'm talking about. Let's wrap this up with a summary. So, maybe a third of an inch of rain, maximum maybe an inch of rain between now and tomorrow sunrise. Rainfall amounts should tend toward that lighter amount. But then as the storm intensifies off the coast, colder air will come in, and then we're expecting that mix to occur, perhaps a change over to sleet and snow during the afternoon and evening, where 1 to 2 inches is possible north of I-85. Again, the closer you get to the Virginia border, the higher the chance you're going to see those amounts. And again, it's rate driven, so, but look for slushy road conditions, again, particularly on elevated roads, bridges, and overpasses where those accumulations do occur. Now, further south, that transition line is going to gradually push south and east, so we could see a snow-sleet mixture as far south as the Highway 64 corridor, and we're talking from Lexington to Pittsboro to Raleigh, east to Wilson, could see a light coating of wet snow, again, mainly on grassy areas. So while we're not expecting adverse travel impacts in that area, again, keep an eye on those rates. Watch the radar. If you see a heavy band get ready to set up in that area, there could be a little bit more than just a light coating. All right. Now, I will point out, and that leads me to the fourth bullet, it's possible you could see a few isolated pockets of heavier snow with accumulations more than 2 inches. However, right now, we're not just sure where that would occur, and confidence is low. So you'll want to stay tuned to updates as we get the latest details. And then, as always, patchy black ice will be possible Tuesday morning as temperatures fall to or slightly below freezing. And I'll add to that, that's mainly where the accumulations occur. So that is the formal briefing here. This should say 8 a.m. for tomorrow will be the next briefing. So I apologize for that. We will definitely be updating these slides as we head through this event.